A humble peasant saved her from the water without imagining that she was a millionaire who would fall in love with him. "Please, help me. The water keeps rising," Valentina shouted from inside the luxury SUV, her face a mix of terror and desperation, as the water already reached her waist. The muscular man holding a machete looked at her intently, rainwater streaming down his soaked t-shirt that clung to his well-formed body. "Hold onto my hand now," he ordered with a firm but reassuring voice, extending his arm toward her. "The door is stuck. I have to break the glass." "No, wait. Let me try to open it one more time," she pleaded, panic evident in her voice as she continued struggling with the handle. Gabriel struck the window with the machete's handle, shattering the glass with surgical precision to avoid hurting the trapped woman. "Come with me if you want to live. The water keeps rising, and this car will sink in minutes." The rain fell heavily on them as Valentina Ruiz fought to get out of the vehicle. 3 hours earlier, she never could have imagined finding herself in this situation. Her life in Mexico City revolved around executive meetings, social events, and planning her wedding to Javier Delgado, the man she thought she knew until that very afternoon. The engagement party at the Ruiz family mansion had been the social event of the year. Valentina, heiress to the Ruiz cosmetics empire, looked radiant in her designer dress as she greeted the guests. Everything was going perfectly until she decided to look for Javier for the official toast. "He must be in the study, miss," one of the waiters had informed her upon seeing her searching through the crowd. Valentina headed to her father's study, her heels clicking on the Italian marble. The door was slightly ajar, and what she saw inside shattered the life she had planned in seconds. Javier, her fiancé, was passionately kissing Carla Mendez, her business partner and supposed friend. "The marriage is just a formality, darling," she heard Javier say as he caressed Carla's face. "Once I have access to the Ruiz fortune, we can expand the business our way. Valentina is too sentimental for business." Without making a sound, Valentina stepped back, tears clouding her vision. Without thinking twice, she grabbed the keys to her SUV and fled the mansion under the torrential rain that had begun to fall over the city. She drove aimlessly, taking rural roads to avoid being found as the storm worsened. Now, hours later, she found herself trapped in a sudden flood in some remote part of Veracruz, with a stranger trying to save her. Gabriel's strong hand pulled her out of the vehicle just as the water reached the dashboard. Valentina fell clumsily into his arms, trembling not only from the cold but also from fear. "My name is Gabriel," he said as he carried her through the current to higher ground. "You're safe now." "Valentina," she replied between shivers, deliberately, omitting her last name as she observed her savior's face. Gabriel Mendoza, 35 years old, never expected to find anyone on that rural road during the worst storm of the season. He had gone out only to ensure his small farm's livestock was safe when he heard the desperate honking in the distance. "We have to get to my house before the current rises more," he explained, helping her walk through the mud. "Is there anyone else in the car?" "No, I'm alone," Valentina answered, clinging to him as they trudged forward. Gabriel's house was modest but sturdy, strategically built on a natural elevation. Upon entering, Valentina noticed the simplicity of the place. Basic, but well-maintained. Furniture, polished cement floors, and a small collection of books that seemed out of place in a peasant's home. "I'll get you some dry clothes," he said, briefly disappearing into a room and returning with a skirt and simple blouses. "They were my sister's. They're not designer, but they're clean and dry." Valentina noticed a strange tone when he mentioned designer, as if there was some resentment in his voice. "Thank you. Anything is better than this," she replied, looking at her own ruined dress. As Gabriel prepared coffee in the small kitchen, Valentina quickly changed behind a blanket he had hung as an improvised dressing screen. The clothes were simple but comfortable, though slightly too big. "What were you doing driving on these roads during a storm like this?" Gabriel asked when she emerged, now changed. No local would go out in this weather. For a moment, Valentina considered making up a story, but something in Gabriel's direct and honest gaze made her opt for a simplified version of the truth. "I was escaping," she admitted, "from a life that turned out to be a lie." Gabriel nodded, without pressing for more details, as if he perfectly understood what it meant to flee from the past. "You can stay until the water goes down. The roads will be blocked for several days according to the forecast. But I don't want to bother you." Surely there's a hotel. Gabriel let out a brief laugh. The nearest hotel is 40 kilometers away and probably flooded too. Don't worry, I have an extra room. As the night progressed and the storm roared outside, they shared a simple dinner of beans, homemade tortillas, and fresh cheese. Valentina, accustomed to fine dining, was surprised to enjoy the food with a pleasure she hadn't felt in a long time. You cook very well for being... She stopped, realizing what she was about to say. For being a simple peasant, he finished with a faint smile. I wasn't always a peasant. Valentina's curiosity grew, but she didn't press. She was aware that she, too, was keeping secrets. Later, as Gabriel showed her the small room where she would sleep, Valentina accidentally tripped over a partially hidden box under the bed. The lid slid off, revealing a shiny object that contrasted with the simplicity of everything else. She bent down to pick it up and froze upon recognizing what it was, a prestigious architecture award. The engraved name left her breathless. Miguel Herrera for innovation in sustainable design. Miguel Herrera, she murmured, looking at Gabriel with confusion. Gabriel's expression transformed, a mix of pain and anger crossing his face. He snatched the award from her hands and brusquely returned it to the box. That man is dead, he said with a tense voice. He died 5 years ago along with everything he loved. Valentina stepped back, startled by the intensity of his reaction. Suddenly, she recognized the name from headlines that had dominated the media years ago. Miguel Herrera, the brilliant architect whose innovative low-cost housing project had collapsed, killing 12 people, including his own family. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Rest, Gabriel interrupted, his voice softer but distant. Tomorrow will be a long day. As he left, Valentina realized she had found refuge with a man who, like her, was running from his past. But unlike her, his reasons seemed infinitely more tragic. That night, lying in the simple bed as the rain continued to fall outside, Valentina made an impulsive decision that would change her life forever. For the first time, she would be just Valentina, not the Ruiz heiress, not the businesswoman, not the socialite, just a woman lost in a storm, finding herself in the most unexpected place. The dawn arrived with a grayish light filtering through the small window. Valentina woke disoriented, taking a few seconds to remember where she was. The simple bed, the unpainted concrete walls, the sound of dripping water outside, everything so different from her penthouse in Polanco. She sat up slowly, noticing that someone had left clean clothes neatly folded on a chair, a cotton skirt and a white blouse, both clearly used but impeccably clean. Upon leaving the room, she found Gabriel in the kitchen preparing what looked like a simple breakfast. "Good morning," he said without turning around. "I hope you managed to rest." "Better than I expected," Valentina replied, settling into a wooden chair. "Thanks for the clothes." Gabriel served 2 plates with scrambled eggs, beans, and freshly made tortillas. The aroma made Valentina's stomach growl. "The roads will stay flooded for at least 3 more days," he commented as they ate. "You can stay here, but you'll have to help with chores. I don't keep idle guests." Valentina nodded, hiding her surprise. No one in her life had ever spoken to her with such frankness, without the deference her last name usually commanded. "Of course, though I should warn you I've never..." She made a vague gesture with her hands. "Done household or farm chores." Gabriel raised an eyebrow. "Never? Not even washing a dish?" Valentina felt her cheeks flush. "We always had staff to take care of that." "Staff," Gabriel repeated, looking at her with renewed interest. "Who are you really, Valentina? The women I know don't talk about staff like it's the most normal thing in the world." "Just someone who wants to forget her old life for a few days," she replied, dodging his piercing gaze. "Didn't you say last night that Miguel Herrera was dead? Well, let's say I'm leaving someone behind too." The silence that followed was tense but brief. Gabriel finally nodded. "Fair deal. I don't ask, you don't ask." After breakfast, Gabriel showed Valentina how to wash the dishes with rainwater he had collected. Her delicate hands, accustomed only to computer keyboards and champagne flutes, were soon red and chapped. You have princess hands, Gabriel commented with a half-smile as he watched her awkwardly dry a glass. But they'll toughen up with time. I'm no princess, she protested, though she knew her privileged life had kept her far from these everyday realities. The morning progressed with Gabriel teaching her basic tasks, sweeping the packed dirt, floor of the patio, feeding the chickens, and picking some vegetables from the small backyard garden. To both their surprise, though Valentina was incredibly clumsy at first, she learned quickly and didn't complain. I never thought carrots came straight out of the ground like this, she commented with childlike wonder as she pulled one from the soil. They're covered in dirt. Gabriel looked at her as if she'd said the most absurd thing in the world. Where did you think they came from? The supermarket? Well, yes. I mean, I know they grow in the ground, but I'd never seen one freshly pulled, she admitted, embarrassed by her ignorance. By noon, Valentina was exhausted but strangely satisfied. There was something gratifying about physical work that she had never experienced in her corporate life. While Gabriel checked the property's perimeter to assess the flood damage, Valentina sat on the small porch, observing the landscape. The lowlands were still underwater, but from this elevation, she could see kilometers around. It was beautiful in a wild, authentic way that the views from her penthouse never had. The main road is still completely flooded, Gabriel reported upon returning. Your car is almost submerged. I'm sorry. Valentina shrugged. The luxury SUV that 2 days ago she considered indispensable now seemed surprisingly irrelevant. It was just a car. Just a car, Gabriel repeated with a brief laugh. It was a Mercedes GL, latest model. It costs more than this house and all my land combined. Valentina was surprised by the precision with which he identified the vehicle. How do you know so much about expensive cars? You don't seem the type. A flash of discomfort crossed Gabriel's face. I had another life, I told you. Miguel Herrera knew about fancy cars. His tone grew distant. But he no longer exists. That afternoon, as they prepared a simple meal together, Valentina tried again. Why did you stop being an architect? The award I saw was prestigious. Gabriel chopped the vegetables with more force than necessary. I thought we agreed not to ask about the past. I'm sorry. It's just that, haven't you heard of the Herrera disaster? He cut her off bitterly. The tragedy that cost 12 lives because the great architect Miguel Herrera didn't properly oversee the materials. Don't you remember the headlines? Valentina fell silent. Of course, she remembered. It had been a national scandal. An innovative, social housing project that collapsed just 3 months after its inauguration. Among the victims were the architect's wife and daughter, who had gone to visit a family living there. Yes, I remember, she admitted softly. I'm sorry. The silence settled between them, heavy as the humidity saturating the air after the storm. Meanwhile, in Mexico City, chaos reigned in the central offices of Ruiz Cosmetics. Javier Delgado, impeccably dressed in a navy blue suit, pounded the boardroom table. It's been 3 days! How is it possible that no one knows where she is? The private investigators he had hired exchanged nervous glances. Mr. Delgado, we've traced the security cameras to the southern exit of the city. After that, she took secondary roads where there's no surveillance. Her phone has been off since the night of the party, one added. The last signal was recorded, near Veracruz, but it's a vast area. Javier ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair. Find her. The wedding is in 2 months, and the merger with Rivera Cosmetics depends on this marriage. He paused significantly. Offer a reward, 50,000 pesos to anyone who provides information about her whereabouts. In his private office later, Javier stared at the photograph of Valentina he kept on his desk. She was beautiful, no doubt, but what really interested him was what she represented. The key to the Ruiz empire. Years of careful planning wouldn't be ruined by a sentimental tantrum. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he rarely used. I need you to expand the search in Veracruz, he ordered without greeting. And I want reports from every hospital, hotel, and police station in that area. Valentina Ruiz has to turn up. Back at the small farm, the days began to take on a surprisingly comfortable routine. Each morning, Valentina learned something new. How to milk the single goat Gabriel owned. how to repair the fence damaged by the flood, how to make fresh cheese. Her hands, once soft and perfectly manicured, developed blisters that eventually turned into calluses. Her skin, tanned by the sun, no longer needed the expensive makeup she used to wear. One afternoon, as they returned from checking the crops, they crossed paths with an elderly woman walking with a cane. "Gabriel, I see you have company," the woman observed with sharp, piercing eyes. "Doña Esperanza, this is Valentina. She's stranded here until the road's clear," Gabriel explained. The old woman studied Valentina from head to toe with a gaze that seemed to see through her peasant disguise. Your hands have been working hard lately," she commented, taking Valentina's hands in her wrinkled ones. "But they weren't born for this work, were they?" Valentina pulled her hands back, uncomfortable. "I'm learning." "We're all always learning, mijita," Doña Esperanza replied with an enigmatic smile. "Especially those who come from very far away, like you." After the old woman said goodbye and continued toward the village, Valentina noticed Gabriel seemed pensive. "Who is she?" she asked. "My neighbor. She arrived in the village a few years ago, shortly after me," Gabriel answered vaguely. "She's wise, though sometimes too nosy." That night, sitting on the porch under a starry sky that was never visible in the polluted Mexico City, Gabriel finally opened up a bit. "I had a successful firm in the capital," he said suddenly, staring at the horizon. "I designed houses for the rich, mostly, but my passion was social projects. When I won the contract for the New Dawn housing project, I thought it was my chance to change lives." Valentina listened in silence, afraid to interrupt this rare moment of openness. "My partner handled the material purchases. I trusted him." Gabriel's voice grew harder. "When the building collapsed, we discovered he had replaced quality materials with cheap ones, pocketing the difference. 12 people died, including my wife Rosa and our 6-year-old daughter Lucia." Valentina felt a lump form in her throat. "I'm so sorry." "I was legally cleared, but people don't forget," Gabriel continued. "I lost everything. My reputation, my family, my will to live. So Miguel Herrera disappeared, and Gabriel Mendoza was born in this forgotten corner." The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Without thinking, Valentina took his hand. To her surprise, he didn't pull away. "I was betrayed by someone I trusted too," she confessed, though less tragically. For a moment, their eyes met, under the moonlight, and something indefinable passed between them. A connection, a mutual recognition of two wounded souls. Gabriel looked away first, gently withdrawing his hand. "We should rest. There's a lot of work tomorrow." As she headed to her room, Valentina realized that for the first time in her life, she wasn't counting the days to return to her old life. In fact, the idea of going back to Mexico City, to endless meetings and superficial parties, provoked a strange sense of emptiness. In front of the small, cracked bathroom mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. Without makeup, with her hair tied back simply, her sun-kissed skin looked younger, more authentic. "Who are you really, Valentina?" she asked herself, recalling Gabriel's question. The answer no longer seemed as clear as it had been her entire life. A month had passed since the flood rescue. The roads had cleared weeks ago, but Valentina was still there, inventing excuses not to leave. First, it was that she needed to save for the fair, then that she wanted to help with the harvest. Gabriel didn't question her reasons, secretly relieved that she chose to stay. That morning, Valentina was milking the goat with a skill that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. Her movements were confident, her hands now hardened by daily work. "You're getting better," Gabriel commented, leaning against the doorframe of the small stable. "You no longer scare poor Manchus." Valentina smiled, remembering her disastrous first attempts when the goat had run off, spilling the bucket of fresh milk. "I have a good teacher," she replied, finishing her task and standing up. Something had changed between them. Their glances lingered a second longer than necessary. Their hands brushed accidentally when passing tools or plates. A new, pleasant, but undeniable tension floated in the air. After breakfast, Gabriel announced his plans for the day. "I'm going to check the cornfield on the east side. Want to come? Or would you rather stay with the chickens?" "I'll go with you," Valentina answered without hesitation. The chickens hate me since I tried to grab their eggs the first time. Gabriel let out a laugh, a sound that had become more frequent lately. They don't hate you. They just think you're an incompetent thief. As they walked among the rows of corn, Valentina breathed deeply. The clean air, the sun on her skin, the earth beneath her bare feet, simple sensations she had never valued in her old life. Sometimes I wonder what my father would say if he saw me like this, she commented, more to herself than to Gabriel. Your father, is he very strict? Valentina hesitated. Talking about her family would reveal too much about her true identity. He was a businessman, built his company from scratch, she replied vaguely. He passed away 3 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry. Me too. Valentina stopped, gazing at the horizon. He wanted me to follow in his footsteps, and I did. But sometimes I feel like I lost a part of myself along the way. Gabriel nodded understandingly. My father was a bricklayer. He wanted me to study to have a better life. When I became an architect, he was proud. He paused, his gaze distant. After the collapse, he refused to speak to me. He died without forgiving me. Valentina impulsively took his hand. It wasn't your fault. It was my project, my responsibility. Gabriel's voice hardened. I should have checked everything personally. I trusted too much. You were deceived, Valentina insisted. Like me. Gabriel looked at her intently, as if trying to decipher a puzzle. What did they do to you, Valentina? What were you really running from that night? Before she could respond, a shout interrupted them from afar. Doña Esperanza was waving at them from the road. Gabriel, Valentina, come eat. I made tamales. Doña Esperanza's house was similar to Gabriel's, but decorated with colorful traditional textiles and potted plants. The aroma of freshly made tamales filled the air. As they ate, the old woman observed the interaction between Gabriel and Valentina with perceptive eyes. You two look good together, she commented bluntly. I haven't seen Gabriel smile like that since he arrived in the village. Valentina felt her cheeks warm. Gabriel coughed uncomfortably. Doña Esperanza, always so direct, he muttered. At my age, there's no time to beat around the bush, the old woman replied, serving more coffee. When life gives you a second chance, you have to take it without fear. After eating, while Gabriel helped Doña Esperanza move some heavy furniture, the old woman approached Valentina, who was washing dishes. Be careful, child, she said in a low voice. Your hands are no longer those of a princess, but your eyes give you away. I don't know who you really are, but Gabriel has suffered too much to endure another disappointment. Valentina stopped washing, surprised by the woman's frankness. I would never intentionally hurt him. Intentions don't always matter. It's secrets that hurt. Doña Esperanza took Valentina's wet hands in hers. I've seen how you look at him and how he looks at you. But relationships built on lies are like houses on sand. The old woman's words weighed on Valentina during the entire walk back. She knew Doña Esperanza was right. Every day that passed without revealing her true identity deepened the deception. That night, sitting on the porch under a starry sky, Gabriel seemed unusually pensive. Do you regret staying so long? He asked suddenly. The roads have been clear for weeks. Valentina looked at the stars, searching for the right words. No. These have been the most real days of my life. Real. In my previous life, everything was superficial. Meetings with people who smiled falsely, relationships based on interests, appearances to maintain. She sighed. Here, only what you can really do matters, who you really are. Gabriel smiled faintly. And what have you discovered you really are? A terrible egg collector, Valentina joked. But a decent goat milker, Gabriel added. They both laughed, and in that moment, their eyes met. The tension that had been building between them for weeks intensified. Slowly, as if giving her time to pull back, Gabriel leaned toward her. The first kiss was tentative, almost shy, a soft press of lips under the silver moonlight. When they parted, Valentina felt a flutter in her stomach that no previous kiss had ever provoked. I never thought I'd feel this again, Gabriel murmured, caressing her cheek with fingers rough from work. "I've never felt this," she replied honestly. The following days passed in a kind of dream. They worked together as before, but now the touches were intentional, the looks open and warm. At night, they shared more of their pasts, or at least carefully selected parts. Gabriel told her about Rosa, his late wife, a primary school teacher, with a contagious laugh and a love for plants. About little Lucia, who at 6 already showed talent for drawing. The day of the collapse, Rosa had taken Lucia to visit a family living in the building, former students who had secured one of the apartments. "If I had done my job properly," Gabriel's voice broke. Valentina hugged him tightly, offering comfort, with her presence rather than words. As their relationship deepened, Valentina's guilt over her deception grew. Every time Gabriel spoke of his distrust toward businessmen and the rich who prioritized profits over lives, she felt a stab of remorse. One afternoon, while Gabriel repaired the roof of a shed, Valentina heard unfamiliar voices. 2 men on motorcycles stopped in front of the house. "Good afternoon, miss," one greeted, showing a photograph. "We're looking for this woman. Her name is Valentina Ruiz. There's a reward for information about her whereabouts." Valentina's heart stopped as she recognized her own image in the photo. It was a picture from the engagement party, her in her designer dress with a perfect smile. "I haven't seen her," she replied with a trembling voice, grateful that her current appearance was so far from that polished image. "What did she do?" "Nothing wrong. She's the heiress of Ruiz Cosmetics. She disappeared a month ago, and her fiancé is looking for her," the other man said, handing her a card. 50,000 pesos reward, no questions asked. When the men left, Valentina sat on the porch steps, trembling. Her past was catching up with her. It was only a matter of time before someone recognized her. Gabriel returned shortly after, immediately noticing her shaken state. "What happened?" he asked, kneeling in front of her. "Some men came asking about someone," Valentina replied vaguely. "It startled me a bit, that's all." That night, unable to sleep, Valentina made a decision. She had to tell Gabriel the truth before he found out from someone else. "Tomorrow," she promised herself. "Tomorrow I'll tell him everything." But fate had other plans. The next morning, as they were having breakfast, the sound of several vehicles approaching broke the usual tranquility. Gabriel looked out the window, frowning. What the hell? Outside, 3 luxury SUVs had stopped. From the first, a man in an impeccable gray suit stepped out. Valentina recognized him immediately. Javier. "Valentina, do you know these people?" Gabriel asked, noticing her sudden paleness. Before she could respond, Javier and several men, including a cameraman, approached the house. "Valentina, thank God you're okay," Javier exclaimed with false concern. "We've been looking for you everywhere." Gabriel looked back and forth between Javier and Valentina, confusion turning to suspicion. "Valentina?" Javier extended his hand to Gabriel. "Javier Delgado, Valentina Ruiz's fiancé, heiress of Ruiz Cosmetics," he introduced himself with a calculated smile. "I can't thank you enough for taking care of my future wife." Gabriel's face hardened as he grasped the magnitude of the deception. His eyes, which had looked at Valentina with warmth just hours ago, were now cold as ice. "Ruiz," he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "Of the Ruiz Cosmetics empire." Valentina took a step toward him. "Gabriel, I can explain—" "Explain what?" he interrupted, his voice heavy with bitterness. "That you lied to me this whole time? That you mocked the naive peasant?" "No. It was—" "Never like that!" Valentina tried to take his hand, but he pulled away. "Miss Ruiz has been under a lot of stress," Javier interjected, addressing both Gabriel and the cameraman filming discreetly. "She suffered a nervous breakdown before our wedding. We're very grateful for your hospitality, Mr. Mendoza." "Gabriel, Mendoza," Gabriel replied curtly. The cameraman zoomed in, capturing the dramatic reunion. Javier, sensing the tension, possessively put an arm around Valentina's waist. "It's time to go home, darling. Your father would have been very worried." Gabriel stepped back, his face a mask of pain and betrayal. "Was anything we lived real?" he asked in a low voice, just for Valentina. Or was it just a game for you? An experiment to see how the other half lives? Everything I felt was real, Valentina whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Gabriel, please. But he had already turned away, walking into the house and slamming the door shut. Javier seized the moment to guide Valentina toward the SUV, murmuring for the cameras. We're bringing her back to civilization. The wedding will proceed as planned. As the SUV drove away, Valentina looked through the rear window. Gabriel's solitary figure had stepped onto the porch, watching her departure with an unreadable expression. Beside him, almost like a protective shadow, was Doña Esperanza, whose sad gaze followed the SUV until it disappeared into the distance. Valentina felt she was leaving behind not only Gabriel, but also a part of herself she had discovered in that simple place, a genuine part she feared she might never find again in the artificial world she was returning to. The return to Mexico City was like entering a strange alien world. The gleaming skyscrapers, incessant traffic, and constant noise felt excessive to Valentina after the simplicity of rural life. The presidential suite at the Emperador Hotel, where Javier had insisted on staying for privacy, was larger than Gabriel's entire house. The contrast was so overwhelming that Valentina felt dizzy. Tomorrow we'll hold a press conference to announce your return, Javier explained as a team of stylists waited to restore her image. The official story is that you needed time alone to reflect before the wedding. No peasants, no forgotten villages. Valentina barely listened, staring at her hands, now rough and tanned, so different from the perfectly manicured hands she used to have. There will be no press conference, she said finally, lifting her gaze. And there will be no wedding. Javier dismissed the stylists with an impatient gesture. Once they were alone, his mask of loving concern vanished. Don't be ridiculous, Valentina. We've already postponed the wedding once. The merger with Rivera Cosmetics depends on this marriage. The merger can go to hell, she replied with a calm that surprised him. I saw you with Carla at the engagement party. I heard everything. Javier paled momentarily but recovered quickly. A stupid slip, nothing more. Carla means nothing to me. You said I was too sentimental for business and that the marriage was just a formality to access the Ruiz fortune. Valentina stood facing him. So yes, you're right. I am too sentimental to marry without love. Javier's expression hardened. Think carefully, Valentina. Do you think your father would have approved of you rejecting the merger for a countryside romance? Of you abandoning everything he built for a nobody? The mention of her father struck a nerve. Ricardo Ruiz had dedicated his life to building the cosmetics empire, expecting Valentina to continue his legacy. My father wanted me to be happy, she replied, though without the conviction she wished. Your father wanted you to be strong, Javier countered. The industry is changing. Without this merger, Ruiz Cosmetics will lose relevance in 5 years. Valentina walked to the window, observing the city sprawling below her. Doubt crept into her mind. Was she being selfish, betraying her father's legacy for a romantic dream? I need time, she said finally. Time is what we don't have. Javier approached, softening his tone. The board expects an answer on the merger this week. If we marry, we'll control 62% of the Latin American market. Valentina closed her eyes, recalling Gabriel's words about how businessmen prioritized numbers over people. Was that what she was doing? Give me 3 days, she requested. Then I'll give you my final answer. The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings, calls, and carefully orchestrated public appearances. Valentina smiled mechanically for the cameras, answered rehearsed questions, and let herself be guided like a porcelain doll from one commitment to another. At night, alone in her penthouse, she found herself staring at the stars from her terrace, missing the open sky of the farm, the sound of crickets, Gabriel's quiet presence. On the 3rd day, during a dinner at an exclusive restaurant, Javier ordered champagne to celebrate. So, what's your answer? He asked, raising his glass. Do we reschedule the wedding? Valentina observed the bubbling liquid, thinking how what once seemed sophisticated now felt superfluous. How did you know? Gabriel was an architect, she asked suddenly. When you arrived at the farm, you called him a peasant, but never mentioned his past as an architect. Her eyes narrowed. I never told you. Javier hesitated for a moment, long enough to confirm Valentina's suspicions. You must have mentioned it at some point, he replied too casually. Or maybe I investigated. It's natural to want to know who you were with. But something in his response, in his slight hesitation, triggered an alarm in Valentina. That night, instead of returning to her penthouse, she went to the central offices of Ruiz Cosmetics. The building was nearly empty at that hour, except for security staff and a few executives working late. Valentina used her access card to enter the corporate archive, where old documents not yet digitized were stored. Mercedes, her father's longtime secretary who refused to retire, found her there, surrounded by folders. Miss Valentina, what are you doing here so late? I'm looking for information about a construction project from 5 years ago, the New Dawn housing project. Mercedes frowned. The architect's project that collapsed? It was a terrible scandal. Did Ruiz Cosmetics have something to do with it? Mercedes seemed uncomfortable. Your father was very ill at that time. Mr. Delgado handled many subsidiary operations. Javier? Valentina felt her heart race. What did Javier have to do with that project? Ruiz Cosmetics diversified into construction materials that year. It was a lucrative market. Mercedes lowered her voice. Mr. Delgado was the liaison with the contractors. He approved the budgets. With trembling hands, Valentina continued reviewing documents until she found what she was looking for. Contracts, invoices, and purchase orders signed by Javier, authorizing the substitution of high-quality materials for cheaper ones in several projects, including New Dawn. My father never knew, did he? She asked, feeling nauseous. Don Ricardo was already very ill, Mercedes confirmed sadly. He trusted Mr. Delgado blindly. Valentina tucked the evidence into her bag, her mind racing. Not only had she discovered that Javier had betrayed her, but he had been indirectly responsible for the tragedy that destroyed Gabriel's life. Meanwhile, in the village, Gabriel tried to resume his routine as if the month Valentina had spent there had never happened. But everything reminded him of her. The garden they had planted together, the improvements to the chicken coop, even the stray dog she had adopted, which now followed him everywhere. Doña Esperanza visited him daily, bringing food and forcing him to talk. You're wilting like a plant without water, boy, she scolded one afternoon. She lied to me, Gabriel replied curtly, continuing his work repairing a fence. And you didn't lie to her? The old woman retorted. Didn't you? Hide who you really were? It's different. Why? Because you're poor and she's rich? Doña Esperanza shook her head. Pride is poor company for sleeping. The old woman left several old newspapers on the table before leaving. That night, reluctantly, Gabriel looked through them. They were articles about Valentina Ruiz before her disappearance, opening a foundation for low-income women, implementing sustainability policies in her company, rejecting buyout offers from multinationals that wanted to move production out of Mexico. It wasn't the image of the ruthless businesswoman he had imagined. The next day, Gabriel was at the exact spot where he had rescued Valentina, staring at the now dry road, when he heard the sound of several vehicles approaching. His heart skipped a beat, thinking for a moment it might be her. But as they got closer, he saw it was a television crew. Mr. Gabriel Mendoza, we're from National News, a reporter approached with a microphone. We want to interview you about Valentina Ruiz, the heiress who was living with you. Gabriel stepped back, uncomfortable. I have nothing to say. Is it true you had a romance? What do you think of her impending wedding to businessman Javier Delgado? The reporter pressed. There are rumors she canceled the corporate merger. Because of you. This caught Gabriel's attention. She canceled the merger? This morning, in a surprise press conference, the reporter confirmed excitedly, sensing his reaction. She announced that Ruiz Cosmetics will not merge with Rivera International and that the wedding is canceled. It's the corporate scandal of the year. Gabriel felt a mix of confusion and hope. Valentina had canceled everything. For him, before, he could process this. A luxurious black SUV pulled up beside the news crew. Javier Delgado stepped out, his expression furious. Mendoza, he greeted coldly. We need to talk in private. The reporter and her team captured the tense encounter, but Gabriel ignored them, focusing on the man in front of him. We have nothing to talk about, he replied, turning to leave. It's about what happened to your family, Javier said, making Gabriel freeze. I know who you really are, Miguel Herrera. Gabriel turned slowly. What do you know about my family? Javier smirked, taking advantage of the fact that the cameramen were far enough not to hear. I know your partner didn't act alone in substituting the materials. Someone else authorized those changes. Someone with connections to Ruiz Cosmetics. Gabriel's blood ran cold. For years, he had sought answers, trying to understand how his partner had managed to deceive everyone. Are you saying... I'm saying you should stay away from Valentina, Javier interrupted. It would be a shame if the press found out she's romantically involved with the architect responsible for the death of 12 people. I was exonerated, Gabriel growled. Legally, perhaps, but the court of public opinion is less forgiving. Javier stepped closer. Valentina has worked her whole life to honor her father's legacy. Do you really think she'd ruin her reputation for a fleeting romance with you? Javier's words hit Gabriel like physical blows. Doubt crept into his mind. What if Javier was right? What if Valentina regretted her decision when the reality of being with him damaged her public image? If you really care about her, Javier continued, you'll let her move on with her life. She belongs to another world, Mendoza. A world where you'd only be a passing distraction, an exotic whim. Gabriel remained silent, wrestling with his insecurities. Javier's words struck at his deepest fears. Think about it, Javier concluded, returning to his vehicle. Sometimes, if you really love someone, the best thing is to let them go. As the caravan of vehicles drove away, Gabriel stood motionless, torn between his heart's longing and the fear of ruining Valentina's life. What Gabriel didn't know was that at that very moment, Valentina was in the Attorney General's office, presenting evidence against Javier for corporate fraud and criminal negligence related to the New Dawn collapse. These documents prove that Javier Delgado personally authorized the substitution of quality materials for substandard ones, she explained to the prosecutor. He acted without my father's knowledge, who was gravely ill at the time. The prosecutor reviewed the documents with a grave expression. This could reopen the collapse case. Are you aware of the implications, Miss Ruiz? Your company could face million-dollar lawsuits. I am, Valentina replied with determination, and I'm prepared to establish a compensation fund for the affected families. But first, I want justice. As she left the prosecutor's office, Valentina received an urgent call from Mercedes. Miss Valentina, Mr. Delgado was seen heading to the village where you were. He was accompanied by a press team. Valentina's heart raced. Knowing Javier, he would try to manipulate or threaten Gabriel in some way. Prepare the helicopter, she ordered. I'm heading there now. The journey back to the village felt eternal, even by helicopter. As they flew over the region, Valentina saw with horror that the nearby river had overflowed again due to recent rains. Much of the village was underwater once more. Upon landing on elevated ground, she was greeted by scenes of chaos. Residents evacuating their homes, animals being moved to higher areas, and makeshift rescue teams working frantically. And in the midst of it all, organizing the efforts, was Gabriel. The chaos of the flood was total. Valentina stepped off the helicopter under torrential rain, her heart pounding as she spotted Gabriel's figure coordinating the rescue efforts. For a moment, she stood frozen, taking in the scene. He was soaked, shouting instructions, helping evacuate a family whose house was nearly submerged. Without thinking twice, Valentina approached the group of rescuers. I came to help, she shouted over the roar of the rain. I brought supplies in the helicopter. Several volunteers turned to her, recognizing her immediately. Murmurs spread quickly. It's Valentina Ruiz, the millionaire who lived here pretending to be poor. Gabriel turned slowly upon hearing her voice. Their eyes met through the curtain of rain, and for a second, time seemed to stop. Then his expression hardened. We need volunteers at the school, he said curtly. We're setting up a shelter there. Without waiting for a response, he turned back to his work. Valentina swallowed the pain of that cold reception and headed to where he had indicated, ordering her pilot to unload the medical supplies, blankets, and food she had brought. For the next few hours, Valentina worked tirelessly alongside the villagers, organizing supplies, tending to frightened children, and helping the elderly settle into the makeshift shelter. Her business skills proved surprisingly useful for coordinating resources and assigning tasks. By midnight, when the rain finally subsided, Valentina stepped out to the school's courtyard to catch her breath. She was exhausted, dirty, and soaked, but strangely fulfilled. This tangible work with immediate results reminded her why she had loved her time at the farm. "You look like you did when I found you the first time," a familiar voice said behind her. Valentina turned to find Gabriel, as soaked and tired as she was, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. "Except this time, I came to the flood voluntarily," she replied, accepting the cup he offered. An awkward silence settled between them, heavy with unspoken words and conflicting emotions. "Why did you come back?" Gabriel asked finally. "I heard about the flood. I wanted to help." "You could have sent money or a relief team. You didn't have to come yourself." Valentina took a sip of coffee, buying time to organize her thoughts. "I also came for you," she admitted. "I found out Javier was here, and I know his methods." Gabriel's expression darkened. "Your fiancé." "Ex-fiancé," Valentina corrected. "I canceled the wedding and the corporate merger." Something flickered in Gabriel's eyes. Hope, doubt, but it quickly faded. "We should get back inside," he said, avoiding the topic. "The temperature's dropping." As they headed back to the shelter, Valentina decided it was time for the truth. "I discovered something about the New Dawn collapse," she said abruptly, making Gabriel stop in his tracks. "About who really authorized the material substitution." "What are you talking about?" "It was Javier." Valentina looked him straight in the eyes. "He was the liaison between your partner and the material suppliers. I found documents with his signature approving the substitution." Gabriel stared at her, as if unable to process what he was hearing. "Do you have proof?" "I presented it to the Attorney General this morning. They're reopening the case." Valentina took a step toward him. "My father was very ill then. Javier took advantage to make decisions without his knowledge, maximizing profits at the expense of safety." Gabriel ran a trembling hand over his wet face. "Why would you do this?" "It implicates your own company." "Because it's the right thing," she replied simply. "And because I love you, Gabriel. I couldn't bear knowing the man who asked me to marry him was responsible for the tragedy that destroyed you." The confession hung between them, vulnerable and exposed, like an open heart. Gabriel seemed to wrestle with conflicting emotions. "Your company will face million-dollar lawsuits," he said finally. "I know. I've already set up a compensation fund for the affected families." Valentina held his gaze. "Money won't bring back lives, but it's a start." Before Gabriel could respond, urgent shouts interrupted them. One of the makeshift dams had given way, and the water threatened to reach the shelter. "Everyone to the upper floors," Gabriel ordered, his voice regaining authority. "Valentina, help with the children." For the next few hours they worked side by side, organizing the evacuation to the second-floor classrooms. Gabriel's architectural expertise proved invaluable for assessing the structure and designing emergency reinforcements. By dawn, exhausted, but relieved to see everyone safe, they sat on the exterior stairs leading to the second floor, now the only visible part of the entrance. "You handled the crisis well," Gabriel commented, glancing at her sideways. "The Valentina I met at the farm would have screamed at the sight of her wet shoes." Valentina smiled faintly. "That Valentina was real, you know. Just learning. And this Valentina, the heiress who cancels million-dollar mergers and faces corporate scandals, she's real too. As real as you, Gabriel. Or should I say Miguel?" Gabriel looked toward the horizon, where the sun was beginning to peek through scattered clouds. "Miguel died with Rosa and Lucia," he said softly. "But maybe parts of him are still alive in Gabriel." At that moment, Doña Esperanza approached them, walking with difficulty up the wet stairs. "You two should rest," she scolded affectionately. "You've been working all night." "We're fine, Doña Esperanza," Gabriel replied, helping her sit beside them. "How's your house?" "Underwater, like half the village," the old woman sighed. "But the walls are strong. It'll survive, like me." Valentina noticed something odd in their interaction. a familiarity that went beyond simple neighbors. "Gabriel told me you arrived in the village shortly after him," she commented curiously. Doña Esperanza and Gabriel exchanged a meaningful look. "I think it's time she knows the truth," the old woman said finally. "I didn't arrive after Gabriel. I followed him here." "You followed him?" Valentina frowned, confused. "My full name is Vasquez de Morales," the old woman continued. "Rosa Morales, Miguel's wife, was my daughter." Valentina held her breath, looking between Gabriel and the old woman. "You're Rosa's mother? Lucia's grandmother?" "Yes." Doña Esperanza took Gabriel's hand in hers. "When Miguel disappeared after the funeral, I searched for him for months. When I finally found him here, I decided to stay close, but without revealing who I was. He needed space to heal." Gabriel lowered his gaze, visibly moved. "I never understood why I felt this connection with you, why you seemed so familiar. You have the same gestures as my Lucia when you think," the old woman smiled sadly, "and the same furrowed brow as Rosa when you focus." Valentina watched the exchange, understanding the depth of pain both had endured. "Why are you telling me now?" Gabriel asked. "Because it's time to forgive, son," Doña Esperanza replied gently. "I forgave you long ago. Now you must forgive yourself. And maybe," she looked meaningfully at Valentina, "forgive others who, like you, made mistakes, but have a good heart." The silence that followed was laden with emotion. Finally, Gabriel took Valentina's hand and intertwined it with his. "It won't be easy," he said quietly. "We both carry complicated pasts." "The best futures are often built on imperfect pasts," Valentina replied, squeezing his hand. Doña Esperanza smiled, nodding with approval. "Now go rest, you stubborn pair. The village will need you strong in the coming days." Over the next week, as the waters slowly receded, Valentina and Gabriel worked together on the initial reconstruction. She used her business contacts to secure materials and funds, while he contributed his architectural knowledge to design structures more resistant to future floods. News of Javier Delgado's arrest for corporate fraud and criminal negligence reached the village, causing a stir. Newspapers speculated about the connection between the corporate scandal and Valentina's relationship with the mysterious peasant. One afternoon, while reviewing blueprints at the school, which was still functioning as a community center, Gabriel broached the topic they had been avoiding. "What happens when the emergency is over?" he asked, without looking up from the drawings. "You have a company to run in the city. I have a farm to rebuild here." Valentina set down the pencil she was using and looked at him directly. "What do you want to happen?" Gabriel finally raised his gaze. "I want you to be happy, Valentina. But I can't ask you to abandon your life for me. And if I told you I've found more purpose and happiness in these weeks than in years running board meetings?" Valentina took his hands across the table. "We could find a middle path. I have an idea, but I want to know if you'd be willing to consider it." "I'm listening." "I've been thinking about redirecting part of the company toward natural, sustainable products," she explained enthusiastically. "We could establish a foundation to rebuild the village with modern designs that respect local traditions. And you could design again, but this time with full control over materials and processes." Gabriel listened attentively, a spark of interest lighting his eyes. "You're proposing a merger of our worlds." "Exactly," Valentina smiled. "We don't have to choose between your world or mine. We can create a new one together." For the first time since their reunion, Gabriel smiled openly, and Valentina saw in his eyes the man she had met at the farm. Strong, honest, capable of dreaming again. "I think I'd like to try," he said finally. That night, under a starry sky now clear of storm clouds, they sealed their commitment with a kiss that promised a new beginning. It wouldn't be an easy path, they both knew, but they were willing to walk it together. In the distance, from her small house temporarily set up at the school, Doña Esperanza watched them with a serene smile. Finally, after so many years, she could feel that Rosa and Lucia rested in peace, knowing that Miguel, now Gabriel, had found a new purpose and a new love. The life, like the river that had caused so much destruction, finally found a peaceful course, carrying promises of renewal and growth. 3 months after the second flood, the village began to show signs of recovery. Where there had once been precarious houses, now stood solid, colorful structures designed to withstand future river swells. The fully renovated community center now housed a clinic, a library, and a training space. Valentina had settled into a small house near Gabriel's farm, splitting her time between the village and Mexico City, where she continued overseeing the transformation of Ruiz Cosmetics. Her luxury penthouse now felt cold and empty compared to the warmth of her new life. That morning, Valentina was preparing for a crucial video conference with the board of directors. On the rustic table that served as her makeshift desk, papers were scattered, her cutting-edge laptop contrasting with the simple surroundings. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen," she greeted formally as the executives' faces appeared on the screen. "Thank you for meeting on such short notice." "Miss Ruiz," replied the board president, a 60-year-old man who had worked with her father, "we understand you have a proposal to present." For the next hour, Valentina outlined her vision, transforming Ruiz Cosmetics into a company committed to sustainability, using natural ingredients produced by rural communities, and allocating 15% of profits to the New Dawn Foundation, dedicated to dignified housing projects and disaster recovery in affected areas. "These changes require an initial investment," she acknowledged, "but 5-year projections show sustained growth and a significant improvement in our corporate image." The faces on the screen showed varied reactions, from skepticism to cautious interest. "It's a risky proposal, Miss Ruiz," commented one executive. "Are you sure our shareholders will be willing to wait for long-term results?" "Consumers are changing," Valentina replied with conviction. "They seek companies with purpose, not just products. My father built this empire by understanding the needs of his time. Now we must do the same." After a series of technical questions, the moment for the vote arrived. Valentina held her breath as the executives deliberated in a private virtual room. Gabriel entered quietly, placing a cup of coffee beside her and squeezing her shoulder in support. "How's it going?" he whispered. "They're voting," she replied, tension evident in her voice. When the executives returned to the call, the board president cleared his throat. "Miss Ruiz, the board has decided to approve your proposal with some minor modifications that we'll send in writing," he announced. "We believe that though risky, your vision honors your father's innovative legacy." Valentina exhaled slowly, hardly believing what she heard. "Thank you for your trust. I won't let you down." As the call ended, she turned to Gabriel with a radiant smile. "We did it. The first phase is approved." Gabriel hugged her tightly, lifting her off the ground in a celebratory spin. "I never doubted you," he said with pride. "You're the most persuasive woman I know." "I learned from the best negotiator," she teased. "No one haggles over the price of chickens like you." Laughing, they stepped onto the porch to enjoy the sunrise. In the distance, they could see the reconstruction work progressing. Several young architects recruited by Gabriel worked with local residents, implementing his flood-resistant designs. "Ever imagine we'd end up like this?" Valentina asked, leaning against his shoulder, dirt under her nails and happy. Gabriel smiled. "Never. But I also never imagined a city princess would learn to milk goats." "Ex-princess, please," she corrected with mock indignation. "Now I'm a rural entrepreneur with a global vision." Their moment of peace was interrupted by the arrival of Doña Esperanza, accompanied by a man in a suit who looked completely out of place in the setting. "Good morning, lovebirds," the old woman greeted. "This gentleman says he's from the city to talk to you, Valentina." The man stepped forward, extending his hand. "Carlos Mendoza, from the Attorney General's office. We need your final statement for the case against Javier Delgado." The mention of Javier momentarily darkened the mood. The case had moved quickly thanks to Valentina's evidence, but the formal trial was just beginning. "Of course," Valentina replied. "Please, come in." As they headed inside, Gabriel exchanged a significant look with Doña Esperanza. Both knew how difficult it would be for Valentina to relive the ordeal. The meeting with the prosecutor lasted 2 hours. When it finally ended, Valentina looked emotionally drained. "Are you okay?" Gabriel asked when they were alone. "It'll be a long process," she sighed. "The prosecutor says Javier is negotiating with the authorities, offering to turn in other accomplices in exchange for a reduced sentence. Are you worried about what he might say about you? No, she replied firmly. I have nothing to hide. I'm worried about the families who lost loved ones in the collapse. They've been waiting for justice for years. Gabriel hugged her silently, understanding. He himself had avoided thinking too much about the trial, about having to publicly face the trauma he had tried to leave behind. We'll face this together, he promised. In the end, the truth will come to light. That afternoon, while supervising the construction of the new cultural center, a helicopter flew over the village, landing in a nearby clearing. Moments later, a group of men in suits with briefcases approached them. Miss Ruiz, greeted the apparent leader. I'm Eduardo Rivera from Rivera Cosmetics International. Valentina tensed immediately. Rivera had been the main proponent of the merger she had canceled. Mr. Rivera, what a surprise, she replied professionally. What brings you here? Curiosity mainly, the businessman smiled, looking around. I wanted to see for myself what was so important that you rejected a billion-dollar merger. His tone was casual, but there was an edge to his words that didn't go unnoticed by Gabriel, who stepped forward protectively. And now that you've seen it, are you satisfied? Valentina asked calmly. Rivera observed the ongoing constructions, the volunteers working, the evident transformation of the village. I must admit, it's unexpected, he conceded. When Javier told me about your rural project, I imagined something more symbolic, a PR gesture, not a real transformation. I was never interested in empty gestures, Mr. Rivera. Valentina held his gaze. If you'll excuse me, we have work to do. Of course. Rivera handed Valentina a card. But before I go, I'd like to make you an alternative proposal. Our companies could collaborate on social initiatives like this without the need for a full merger. Think about it. As Rivera and his entourage left, Gabriel frowned. I don't trust him. Neither do I, Valentina agreed. But his interest suggests we're doing something significant. Significant enough for one of the country's most powerful businessmen to come investigate in person. Will you consider his proposal? I'll analyze it, she replied diplomatically. In business, you never close doors unnecessarily. Gabriel smiled, recognizing the astute businesswoman she had rediscovered in herself. Your father would be proud, he said softly. Valentina's eyes welled up briefly. I hope so. He believed in building, not just growing. 2 days later, Valentina traveled to Mexico City for the annual shareholders' meeting. It was her first major public appearance since the scandal, and the media were eager to capture her. In the elegant auditorium of the corporate headquarters, Valentina stepped onto the podium, dressed in a formal but understated suit, very different from the ostentatious outfits she used to wear at such events. Distinguished shareholders, she began. Ruiz Cosmetics is at a turning point. Recent events force us to reflect on the kind of company we want to be. With clarity and passion, Valentina presented her vision for the future. A company committed to sustainability, social responsibility, and ethical innovation. She explained how the pilot project in the flooded village was already yielding positive results, and presented data showing that consumers preferred brands with clear purposes. My father's greatest legacy was not a profitable company, but one that improved lives, she concluded. Today, I ask you to join me in this new chapter, where success will be measured not only in profits, but in the positive impact we generate. When she finished, there was a moment of silence before applause broke out. Not enthusiastic ovations, but a cautious acknowledgement of the shift she proposed. During the Q&A session, a minority shareholder stood up. Miss Ruiz, there are rumors about your relationship with Gabriel Mendoza, formerly known as architect Miguel Herrera. Don't you consider this relationship a conflict of interest, given the historical connection between him and the scandals that affected our company's subsidiaries? The room fell silent. It was the question everyone wanted to ask, but no one had dared. Valentina maintained her composure, though her heart raced. My personal relationship with Mr. Mendoza is just that, personal, she replied firmly. However, there is no conflict of interest. On the contrary, his experience as an internationally recognized architect has been invaluable for our reconstruction projects. As for the scandals you mention, I remind you that Mr. Herrera was legally exonerated, and current investigations point to other responsible parties within our previous corporate structure. A murmur ran through the room. Valentina continued. In fact, I believe our collaboration represents a unique opportunity to rectify past mistakes and build a better future, both literally and figuratively. If any shareholder finds this unacceptable, I respect their right to sell their shares. The boldness of her response left many stunned. The old Valentina would have offered conciliatory apologies or downplayed the relationship. This new Valentina was willing to defend her decisions, even before powerful shareholders. At the meeting's end, the results were mixed. Some shareholders expressed concerns, others enthusiastic support. But most importantly, the majority decided to give Valentina the chance to prove her vision could be both ethical and profitable. Back in the village, Valentina found Gabriel and Doña Esperanza waiting anxiously. We saw the broadcast online, Gabriel said, embracing her. You were magnificent. She's right, Doña Esperanza smiled. This girl has guts. Valentina collapsed into a chair, exhausted. It was intense, but I think we secured the support needed to move forward. And now what? Gabriel asked. Now, Valentina replied with renewed energy. We implement the full plan. Phase 1, finish the village reconstruction. Phase 2, officially establish the foundation. Phase 3, launch the new line of locally produced natural products. Gabriel looked at her with admiration. The frightened woman he had rescued from the waters had transformed into a visionary leader who combined the best of both worlds. I have a proposal, he said suddenly. Before we dive into all that, let's take one day just for us. No meetings, no construction, no calls, just you and me. Valentina smiled broadly, remembering that amid all the work, they had barely had time to nurture their relationship. Sounds perfect. What do you have in mind? It's a surprise, he replied mysteriously. Just be ready tomorrow at dawn. The next morning, Gabriel took her to a special place, the riverbank that had brought them together twice. But instead of the chaos of floods, there was now a small table set for a romantic breakfast, surrounded by wildflowers. It's beautiful, Valentina sighed, touched by the gesture. This place changed my life twice, Gabriel said as he poured coffee into simple but elegant cups. The first time, when I lost everything. The second, when I found you. As they ate, they talked without the usual pressures, rediscovering each other. Gabriel shared his youthful architectural dreams, while Valentina recounted stories of her privileged but lonely childhood. After breakfast, Gabriel took her hand and led her to a nearby small hill. There, he unrolled a carefully folded blueprint. What's this? Valentina asked curiously. Our future, if you want it, Gabriel replied, with a mix of nervousness and hope. It's the design for a house for us. Valentina studied the plans with awe. The design was magnificent. A modern structure perfectly integrated with the natural surroundings, with rainwater collection systems, solar panels, and spaces for both daily life and work. It combines the best of both worlds, like us, Gabriel continued. Spacious enough for city guests, but connected to the land, with offices so you can run your company from here, and a studio for my designs. It's perfect, Valentina murmured, deeply moved. Gabriel took a deep breath before continuing. The house is only part of what I want to offer you, he said, kneeling before her. Valentina Ruiz, would you do me the honor of sharing your life with me? Not just this house, but all the dreams, projects, and challenges to come? Tears of happiness welled in Valentina's eyes as she nodded. Yes, Gabriel, 1,000 times yes. The kiss that followed sealed a promise to build a future together that honored their pasts, but wasn't limited by them. In the distance, watching, discreetly from behind a tree, Doña Esperanza smiled with tears in her eyes. Finally, after so much pain, she could feel her family finding peace. Rosa and Lucia would be proud. The waters that had once destroyed lives had now given way to new beginnings. Like the river that eventually finds its natural course, Valentina and Gabriel had found their path to each other through storms and losses, toward a horizon full of hope. A year had passed since that second flood that reunited Valentina and Gabriel. The village, once vulnerable and forgotten, now looked transformed. Sturdy, colorful houses lined paved streets. A modern community center housed a school, a clinic, and training workshops. Most impressive was the new Ruiz Cosmetics factory, where local women and men processed natural ingredients from the region for the successful Essence of the Earth product line. The house Gabriel had designed for them stood majestically on a small hill overlooking the now controlled river, thanks to intelligently designed containment systems. It was a harmonious blend of modernity and tradition, with large windows that let natural light flood every space. That special morning, Valentina looked at her reflection in the mirror. She wore a simple white cotton dress, very different from the ostentatious wedding gown she had chosen for her cancelled wedding with Javier. Her hair, adorned with wildflowers, fell freely over her shoulders. "You look beautiful," Doña Esperanza said, entering the room with a small carved wooden box, like a true country bride. Valentina smiled, nervous but happy. "Do you think Gabriel will like it?" "He'll love it," the old woman assured her. "I've never seen that boy so nervous and excited at the same time." Doña Esperanza opened the box and took out a delicate pearl necklace. "This necklace belonged to Rosa, my daughter," she explained, her voice slightly trembling. "She wore it on the day she married Miguel. I'd like you to wear it today." Valentina felt tears threatening to ruin her simple makeup. "Doña Esperanza, I can't accept it. It's too personal." "Precisely because it's personal, I want you to wear it," the old woman insisted, placing the necklace around Valentina's neck. "Rosa would have wanted Gabriel to find happiness again, and you, my dear, have brought light back to his eyes." The two women embraced, united by the love they both felt for Gabriel, though in different ways. "Thank you for accepting me into your family," Valentina whispered. "You built your own place in it," Doña Esperanza replied with wisdom. "With your actions, not your words." Meanwhile, in the backyard garden, guests were beginning to arrive for the ceremony. It wasn't an ostentatious wedding as it would have been in Valentina's old life, but an intimate celebration with about 50 people. Villagers who had become friends, some Ruiz Cosmetics executives who supported Valentina's vision, and a few close friends from the city. Gabriel, dressed in light pants and a white cotton shirt, waited nervously under a flower and branch arch he had built himself. Beside him, as an impromptu best man, was Carlos, a young architect who had come to work on the reconstruction projects and had become his right-hand man. "Breathe, man," Carlos teased, noticing Gabriel's tension. "It looks like you're going to a trial, not your wedding." "It's just that I still can't believe it," Gabriel confessed. "After everything that happened, finding this kind of happiness feels deserved," Carlos completed. "Because it is. You both have worked hard to rebuild not just this village, but your own lives." The conversation was interrupted by the first chords of traditional music. All the guests stood and turned their gaze toward the house, where Valentina appeared on the arm of Santiago, the village mayor, who had agreed to give her away in the absence of her father. Gabriel held his breath as she approached. It wasn't just her beauty that moved him, but everything she represented. The woman who had come into his life as a frightened stranger and was now his partner, his ally, his confidant. When Valentina reached his side, Gabriel noticed the pearl necklace and looked questioningly at Doña Esperanza, who nodded with a serene smile. The gesture touched him deeply, understanding its meaning. A final blessing, the closure of a cycle, permission to be fully happy again. The ceremony was simple, but emotional. Instead of traditional vows, each had written a letter to the other. Gabriel read first. "Valentina, when I rescued you from those waters, I didn't know that you were the one coming to rescue me. I was drowning in my own pain, my guilt, my loneliness. You taught me that it's possible to start again, that past mistakes don't define our future. I promise to build with you. Not just houses and projects, but a life of honesty, respect, and love. From the floods to eternity, my heart is yours." Valentina, her voice trembling with emotion, read her letter. "Gabriel, I came into your life, running from my own, not knowing who I really was. In your simplicity, I found my truth. In your strength, I discovered mine. You taught me the value of honest work, of authenticity, of building with hands and heart. I promise to stand by your side in every project, every dream, every challenge. Two worlds that met in a storm and decided to create a new one together. I love you for who you are, for who I was with you, and for who we'll become together. There wasn't a dry eye among the guests when they exchanged rings. Simple silver bands Gabriel had designed, engraved with patterns representing the flow of water, a symbol of what had brought them together. By the power vested in me by this village, and the affection of all present, declared the local judge officiating the ceremony, I pronounce you husband and wife. The kiss that sealed their union was met with applause, cheers, and in Doña Esperanza's case, silent tears of joy and nostalgia. The celebration that followed was a vibrant mix of local traditions and touches of elegance. Homemade food served on fine china, regional music alternating with modern classics, traditional dances alongside contemporary rhythms. It was, like everything in Valentina and Gabriel's new life, a harmonious fusion of two worlds. During the banquet, Mercedes, Ricardo Ruiz's longtime secretary, approached the couple with an envelope. "Miss Valentina, I found this among your father's belongings," she explained. It seems he wrote it during his final days but never got to deliver it. Intrigued, Valentina opened the envelope. It was a letter written in her father's trembling handwriting from his last moments. "My dear Valentina, when you read this, I'll probably no longer be by your side. There are so many things I wish I could have told you, so much advice I wish I could give you, but time is running out. I just want you to know that I built this empire for you, but I never wanted it to be a cage. I created it to give you options, not to limit them. My greatest fear is that you'll feel obligated to live the life I designed instead of the one you choose. My greatest wish is that you find your own path, that you take the best of what I've left you and transform it into something that truly represents you. And above all, that you find someone who loves you for who you are, not for what you have or represent. I trust your judgment. You've always been wiser than you think."